Surveillance is kind of intrinsically a technology that can be wielded in many different ways. It's an instrument of power. It allows people in authority to extend their power over broad swaths of population.
That's Dake Kang. He's one of two reporters who led an investigation into Silicon Valley's enabling of brutal mass detention and surveillance in China. Internal documents that Kang and freelance reporter Yael Gruer sifted through showed that companies have been selling billions of dollars worth of tools that wound up in the hands of police and security agencies. That was despite repeated warnings from Congress and human rights groups. I'm your host, Haya Panjwani. In this episode of The Story Behind the AP Story, Kang and Gruer walk us through how this system works and what it means for the people living under it.
So basically, I have this massive file, or set of files. Like, I had all these internal emails from Landasoft and databases, and, they're in Chinese. I don't know what to do. I'm like, I need help, reporting this out. And, so that's how it started.
And a lot of people think of it as being a Chinese phenomenon, that this is something that was constructed by the Chinese, that it's kind of a Chinese, unique to China kind of system. But it's not. We basically found out that, this is a history that stretches back, 3 decades. American tech companies basically brought a lot of these technologies and concepts to China to help the Chinese build their digital police state.
Predictive policing is when police departments use algorithms to analyze massive amounts of information that they say will help predict and prevent potential future crimes. But the problem with it is that people sometimes get arrested for crimes that they haven't committed and might never commit because these systems are never 100% accurate.
And it really matters a lot who's wielding them, right? I mean, they're basically tools that the state uses for their own purposes, to spy on you, to look into your activities, to figure out what you're doing. And depending on what their goal is, that goal could be, preventing crime, making sure that bad people don't do things, or it could also be making sure that people don't foment dissent against the state, that they don't say things that the government doesn't like. We didn't even know what the story was in the beginning. We knew it was significant because this is basically the machinery of how this predictive policing surveillance apparatus in Xinjiang worked. But how to tell that story and what the broader implications were, that didn't really become clear until at least, 6 months in. Started to see that there was a lot of American companies that were popping up in these documents. There were references to companies like Amazon Web Services, Microsoft, this IBM software called i2. There was just a lot of Oracle, right? I mean, there was just a lot of American companies that were popping up. And I started looking into the corporate records of this company that we got this leak from. It's a company called Landasoft. They're a Shanghai-based company, and they have a bunch of public documentation, annual corporate reports, and so on. And looking through them, I realized that one of their biggest partners was IBM. And that was like a real aha moment for me. I was just like, what on earth is the surveillance company behind the software that flagged and triggered the detention of hundreds of thousands of people in Xinjiang doing with IBM?
The companies told the AP they followed all laws, past and present. IBM says it cut ties with Landasoft in 2014.
Well, a lot of what we spent time talking about was how did this even get sold to China? Isn't that illegal? Is it illegal? Is it sold through third parties, which it is in many cases? So a lot of it was trying to figure out, did they sell it? How did they market it? Is this even legal? What are the loopholes that allow them to do this? That kind of thing. For example, there's a ban on military and policing gear, but it doesn't account for newer technologies or general use products that can be applied in policing.
And then looking even further at the companies themselves, we just started finding all of these marketing materials. Wow, many of these companies were actually marketing this stuff to the Chinese police. And the reaction of these companies has always been to kind of throw their hands up and be like, well, we didn't know about this, we condemn the misuse of our gear in this particular way. We started digging in and asking, is that really true? And we found out, no, in many cases, they actually knew exactly what they were doing. And locating good sources was a challenge. A lot of our sources are people who are Chinese citizens, who may have left China because they're quite scared for their own security or for their families. And they're speaking to us only really because they want to speak out about what they had seen. But, they themselves were the victims of this digital policing. And so often they themselves are quite paranoid and they don't want to be identified. They're scared to even talk to you because they're worried that you could potentially identify them. Even by calling them, they worry that their phone call could be intercepted.
There's so many more people that it's negatively impacted that I don't think would speak to the media because they're already at risk. So people have essentially been silenced. So there's just a lot of stories and voices that we can't get because of the impact of this technology on their lives. They are essentially silenced.
I think another aspect of the story is the petitioners, right? So actually our story is focused around a family that is petitioning for redress for, wrongs that local officials have done to them. They basically had their land confiscated. They felt as though they didn't get proper compensation, and then they were basically subjected to a harassment campaign to force them to cough up their land. But one of the really striking things is that, in the past, petitioners were quite common. They would really show up to Beijing in big numbers. You would have hundreds of petitioners show up. You had plenty of foreign media reporting about them. Like over the past 5-10 years, they've just disappeared. You don't see petitioners in Beijing anymore. But the thing is, they've moved online. And as a journalist in Beijing, I get messages from people all the time. There are people who are trying to get to Beijing, they're trying to get attention to their problems, but now there's this massive predictive policing digital apparatus in place that is there to ensure that they never make it to Beijing. If you're just an ordinary tourist and you just go to Beijing, you're like, wow, everything's great. Like, there's no problems here, right? Because you don't see it. 15 years ago, you've been like, wow, why are there so many, people like, waving signs or whatever, right? Like it was much more visible, and it's completely shoved under the surface.
Since Kang and Gruer published their story, lawmakers and activists across the political spectrum have called on American tech firms to stop selling surveillance equipment to Chinese police and for Congress to examine the issue. Republican Senator Josh Hawley of Missouri told the AP he wanted to call tech companies before Congress to ask how their technology experts were used. This has been the story behind the AP story. I'm Haya Panjwani. Thanks to Date Kang and Yael Gruer for contributing to this episode. For more on this story and other AP investigations, visit apnews.com.